Hello? 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 Okay, can everybody hear me? If you can hear me, type in the chat that the sound is good to go. This is Jessica Cloud, and we're going to get started with the fourth quarter. This is Jessica Cloud, and we're going to get started with the fourth quarter. Okay, I think we have our technical difficulties ironed out here. I still haven't gotten any response from folks in the chat that you can hear me okay, but I think it was coming through because I was hearing it on my side as an echo. So we got 8 folks on right now. I know we're expecting a few more, so we're going to wait just another minute before we get started with our content. And again, if you could give me a shout out in that chat box, let me know that you can hear me okay. That would be great. Down here in Hattiesburg, again, we've got warm weather, sunny, and it is blooming all over the place, and the allergies are rampant. So please forgive me if you hear me sniffling today on our webinar. And does everybody have access to the chat box over on the right-hand side? Because this is where we'll be communicating with questions. I'm just going to type that over to you guys. Can you see that on the right-hand side? Because I do want to make sure I have a way to take your questions today. Everybody hear me? I'm a little worried about jumping in and getting started without some feedback from you guys. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started today, and I do hope that you can hear me okay. The chat box on the right-hand side is where we'll be communicating in the webinar today, and so I hope that you will find that and use that to type questions to me and to let me know whether everything is going well in terms of you being able to get this information. So I'm Jessica Cloud, and I am going to be hosting this webinar today, talking about fourth quarter phonathon and planning to finish strong. So this is a really important topic, I think, because there are a couple of key dangers going into the fourth quarter that we're going to walk through And I do hope that you will leave this webinar with literally dozens of actionable tips that apply to your situations. I've tried to cover as many situations as possible here for the fourth quarter to give you some real concrete things that you can go ahead and prep and have ready. For most of us, our fourth quarter is April, May, and June. If you're on a July to June fiscal year, that's what I've seen most commonly. And even if you're not, if your fiscal year end is September, you still have plenty of time to prep for a really strong fourth quarter. So again, I'm just going to be flipping back and forth between the Google Hangout to make sure that you guys have not been putting questions in, and back to my PowerPoint presentation so I can keep it moving along for you. So before we move into what our agenda is going to be today, who the heck is this gal, Jessica Cloud? Why should I listen to her when it comes to Phonathon? So my name's Jessica Cloud, of course, and I write on my blog at realdealfundraising.com. I've been in Phonathon a long time, so longer than I care to admit. I actually began as a caller at my alma mater in 1999. So I spent 4 years as a caller, trainer, and student supervisor at the University of Southern Mississippi. Did some political fundraising in Washington, D.C. for a while, and then I went to work for Ruffalo Cody, now Ruffalo Noel Levitz, and I supervised about 110 student callers at the University of South Carolina. I did that for about 4 years, and so really hands-on Phonathon management with that position. I did some behind-the-scenes stuff as a project manager with Ruffalo Cody, so really learning the data side of things. And then I became a client and managed an outsourced Phonathon through Ruffalo Cody for the University of Southern Mississippi. I've also done some consulting. I also been a regular conference and webinar presenter with Academic Impressions, a lot of that in annual giving and Phonathon. So now I'm still learning. I am the Vice President for Advancement of a small seminary in Berkeley, California, Star King School for the Ministry, even though I'm coming to you from my home office here in Hattiesburg, Mississippi today. And we just did our very first pop-up Phonathon. It was my very first paper Phonathon, and it worked really well. It was a good thing for the school since we don't really have the big budget to run an automated program for Star King. So I'm still learning, but I think I have a lot that I can share. And one of the reasons I started Real Deal Fundraising was because I felt like young fundraising professionals weren't getting the support that they needed, especially if they entered via Phonathon. There wasn't enough training and support for folks coming in to that vehicle in annual giving so that they could grow and develop as professionals. So that's my goal today, is to help you as much as possible and offer whatever support that I can to help you succeed in this industry. So we're just going to jump in to our content. And so I just want to say that this is a really critical time of year in Phonathon. And that is because there's two dangers that pretty much apply to just about everybody at this point. And the dangers are really one and the same. So you could be doing well, or you could be falling behind. And they're ultimately the same danger because they cause you to become complacent. So if you're doing well, that's great. But are you really doing well, or are you just up in your pledges? And if you're doing well, does that mean that you coast the rest of the year? And if you coast the rest of the year, not only will you not maximize your potential for your institution this year, but you're likely to miss a lot of opportunities that will set you up for a strong next year. So next fall really begins now in the planning. So that's really one of the dangers if you're doing well. And I've got a lot of tips for how to avoid that and make sure that you still have a plan and that you're laying the groundwork for the future. The other danger is that you're falling behind. And obviously, this is a danger because you might not reach your goals. But it's even more of a danger because once you decide that something is not possible, why would you logically take action to change it? So the complacency that comes from believing that you won't reach your goal is the real danger here with falling behind. And even if you're not going to reach your goals for this year, you can do your best to minimize the damage, probably get really close to reaching your goals, and also, again, lay the groundwork for next fall. Maybe you needed more resources than you were given this year. I'm going to kind of show you how to get to the point where you can get that next year. So those are the two dangers. So where do you fall on that continuum? Are you doing really well and in danger of becoming complacent and coasting? Or are you starting to fall behind and wondering whether or not, you can do anything to salvage this fiscal year? So I also like to start every presentation I do to remind us of the so what. So obviously you think it's important to have a strong fourth quarter because you're here on this webinar listening to it. So, but just in case your boss told you you need to go to that webinar and you're not fully on board, let's just take a minute to really think through why we want to do all these things. Why do we want to do this? Why do we want to have a rough fourth quarter and doing a lot of stuff, new initiatives, when we could just coast to the end? Well, of course, we need to hit our dollar and our donor goals. That's important to our institutions, right? But it's also important that we're watching our budget, that we're spending our budget wisely. Maybe we need some last minute funds in the fourth quarter to be able to hit our dollar and donor goals. How do we identify that and make sure we get what we need? There's also the danger that you don't spend all of your budget. And if you have a good CFO, they'll identify that you didn't spend those funds, and probably you'll have a hard time getting those funds back next year. And this one's really important. I mean, you owe it to your students to hit these goals. Your students have been coming in and smiling while they're dialing and getting told no and keeping their spirits up while they get hung up on all year long. Isn't it worthwhile for you to give them a moment of celebration, even if it's just to send out an email over the summer saying, hey, everybody, we met our goal, and have that moment of celebration for your student callers? It's important. I think you owe it to them to try to reach those goals. Likewise, you kind of owe it to your boss. And that's how people get promoted, by the way. They make their boss look good. That's really what ultimately makes you successful. So you owe it to both those that you manage and managing up to try to hit these metrics this year. If it doesn't fulfill, it doesn't matter. I hinted at this a second ago, but really, if you're up in pledges date over date from last year and you think that's a reason for you to coast, it really doesn't matter what you have in terms of pledges. What matters is the dollars that come in the door that can actually be put towards the mission of your institution, whether that's scholarships or classroom equipment or faculty development, whatever it is at your institution. But if it doesn't fulfill, it can't do that. So you really need to change your focus going into the fourth quarter about getting those dollars in the door. And I already said this too, but a strong fall semester starts now. So no matter how desperate your situation is in the fourth quarter, you need to be planning for the fall. And no matter how great you're doing for the fourth quarter, you need to be planning for the fall semester. And obviously, your future career prospects hang in the balance. Your ability to be known as a person that reaches their goals and does what they say and says what they're going to do is right out there. Are you the type of person that finishes strong, or are you just a good starter out of the gate? It's an integrity thing for me. Most importantly, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. So that's why we're here. So what exactly am I going to cover in this next, 40 minutes or 50 minutes with you guys? It really boils down to three things. So in the fourth quarter, we want to reach our goals. We also want to finish strong. And by that, I mean adequate stewardship and fulfillment work in the fourth quarter. And then we want to be preparing for next year. So making sure that we're laying that groundwork, because, to begin to do strategic planning in July and August is way too late especially if you're going to lobby for increased resources and other things that you need for your Phonathon. So that's the three things that we're going to cover. And I'm going to give you lots of ideas in each category, which I hope will be very helpful. And We will take a question break here in a second after we've gone through the 3 major topics. And then we'll talk a little bit more about takeaways and your action plan coming out of this webinar. What are you going to do in the next few weeks to prepare for April 1st, the start of the 4th quarter for most of us? And then we will, see if you have any more questions at the end. Reaching your goals. I mean, what's impossible? Because really your mindset dictates a lot of whether you're willing to do anything in this area. Do you believe that it is possible for you to reach your goals this year? Is it something that is feasible? Because if it's not, you are not going to take action. It's definitely not going to be something worthwhile, because a lot of these items are going to require effort on your part. Effort right now, as soon as we get off of this webinar. So you need to decide in your head that you're going to make things possible. So I'll give a personal example. When I was hired with Ruffalo Cody, I really didn't get trained and up and running until about January. And between January and June 30th, I needed contractually to complete 112,000 phone calls. And I had no idea how I was going to do that. So I had decided kind of in my head that it wasn't possible. And another fellow manager sort of shook me out of this reverie and said, no, you have to do this. Like, you have to find a way. So not only did I really go on a huge staffing binge and I hired a lot of students and got them trained up really quickly, but we also began to run lots of extra shifts. So motivating the students who were working to work extra and incentivizing them to do that in a real way. So I have found, as I've done consulting and worked with people, looked at their phonathon statistics at conferences and so forth, that a lot of the problem in phonathons is volume. It's not that you're calling wrong, you're not calling enough in most cases. So if you're having trouble reaching your goal, either your dollar goal or your donor goal, you need to run some extra shifts probably. You can run them on weekends if you're not running on weekends. Run Sunday shifts. I know when I was in this stuck situation, we actually ran triple Sunday shifts. So we would run Sunday A, B, and C, 12 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9. It was grueling, but it was what we needed to do to get the job done. You can run Saturday morning shifts like 10 to 12 or 10 to 11:30. Shorter shifts on Saturday morning. It catches a lot of different folks. If you're an East Coast or a Central Time Zone school and you have a large enough contingent of West Coast prospects, people out in California, Oregon, Washington, etc., you can run occasional late night calling shifts. So it's not legal to call folks after 9 p.m. in their time zone. But if you're calling West Coast folks from 9 to 10:30, and you do that a couple times a week, you can get some more calls in and catch those folks at a better, more feasible time for them, and also get more calling done. Day shifts are great for reaching older alumni. So folks who graduated in the 50s and 60s may be retired, and you may catch them at home during the day. They're also more likely to have landlines, that group is. And then also education majors, especially teachers, and especially teachers in the summer. So as you move into late April and May, catching those education majors at home during the day is a likely thing that you will be able to do. So running something from like 2 to 5. And Friday blitz shifts were one of my favorite things. So on Fridays, you can have the callers come in for a really long shift. Let them know that as long as they stay for at least an hour, they can drop in and drop out of the shifts. They can come for 2 hours and then leave to go to something and then come back. But, you make sure that they're well supplied with cupcakes, cookies, pizza, and you give away a gift card randomly every hour for the person with the most credit cards or whatever. But you make it really fun, and you get a lot of calling hours done on the occasional Friday blitz shift. So another thing that you need is not only you need to run extra shifts, but you need to hire more students usually. So a lot of people kind of give up, like, well, who would want a job just for the month of April? Well, a lot of students would. For a lot of students, they don't get a job, or they quit another job at midterms. Then they get over that midterm hump, and they want somewhere to go work again. So, try it. Try hiring people in April. Try hiring folks in the summer. You may get a whole different contingent of students. So you may have students who are off campus who need a job over the summer to make their rent. You'll attract a different crowd for that summertime calling. And reopening calling pools. I really preach this a lot, because I find that a lot of phonathons are still managed on what I would characterize as an antiquated calendar system. So reopening those calling pools, this is like when you're calling a college and you arbitrarily say, we're going to start calling the College of Business on September 1st, and we're going to finish it on September 20th. So you're going to call them for like 3 weeks, and you're done for the year. Lots of phonathons are still run this way. If yours is still run this way, I would be willing to bet that you only got those calling pools 30, 40, maybe 50% completed in terms of how many people you actually reached. And that means that there's still a lot of life left in those calling pools. So I encourage you to go back to those deans and directors and let them know that you want to raise more money for them. They're not going to be worried about that. They're going to be thrilled that you want to raise more money for them right now in the fourth quarter. Let them know that you're going to reopen those calling pools and give the callers those fresh records and prospects to contact. This is going to help your callers be more motivated, because they're going to be really talking to people more. You'll get more donors for your alumni participation rates, and you will get more dollars by reopening these calling pools. If it's not 60, 70, 75% completed, then you still have a lot more life left in those calling pools. So I encourage you to abandon that sort of block calendaring system, especially in the fourth quarter, and reopen some things, reopen some segments. Likewise, if you are in the opposite situation and you have called and called and called, and your calling pools are dwindling and getting very small, if you're on an automated calling system, this can begin to really slow you down. So I recommend most calling softwares will enable you have the ability to create a cross-segment calling pool. So what that means is that you can take a lot of different segments, but make one big calling pool to put them in. And that enables the computer system to dial them a little bit faster. So you'll need to identify a caller who's experienced, who can call, these calling pools that were once small that you're now putting into one big pool. It will not affect your back-end statistics. It won't change any of your statistical reports, but it will enable the computer system to dial through faster, enabling you to get more done. So just pick a caller who is comfortable switching scripts on the different phone calls whenever people pick up. And you will be able to get through a lot more of those, like probably those LIBUNT records, those last year donors, and last year people who gave on a credit card. Those pools are probably getting pretty small at this point in the year. So combine them all, make one giant calling pool for all the credit cards and all the last year donors. And it'll help you get through them a little more quickly. Obviously, you want to focus on credit cards in the fourth quarter. Credit cards are where it's at, because credit cards are instant fulfillment, right? So again, if it doesn't fulfill, it doesn't matter. So your first focus needs to be switching all of your motivation to incentivizing credit cards. After the credit card is pushed, and that means that the caller is first off doing an assumptive credit card ask. Assumptive means they assume that the prospect wants to give on a credit card. Because obviously, if Waffle House takes credit cards, if McDonald's takes a credit card now, if callers call Jimmy John's on their break and give them their credit card number over the phone, we should assume that people are going to pay via credit card, that it's the default payment option. So very simply, an assumptive credit card ask says, which credit or debit card would you like to use tonight? Boom. And then they need to follow up with a second ask if the person balks at giving the credit card on the first. And this can be really tailored to their specific situation. I'll talk a little bit more about that on our next slide. But it also can be really simple, what I call the reasons plus reconsider rebuttal. So you just say, well, the reason we ask you to fulfill your gift via credit card is because it saves the institution postage and processing costs. It's also really fast and allows us to put your gift to work more quickly. Would you reconsider? So give the reasons why you asked for the credit card and then back it up with that you reconsider, and end it with a question. It's really important. So if they've done all of that, if they've done the assumptive, they've done a rebuttal, then they need to try to capture that email address and let the prospect know. Go ahead and mention that we really would like for you to fulfill it online, because we are getting really close to the end of our fiscal year and we'd like to get everybody's gifts in so that they can be put to work as soon as possible. So the third option would be to capture that email address so that they can do an online fulfillment on the website. And from there, I would encourage you to think about possibly altering your reminder schedule. So I know the default for many institutions is a 30, 60, 90-day reminder. So you give the prospect 30 days to have things back, to have the gift, the pledge come back in. And so it's 30-day due date. Then you would send them a reminder if they didn't send it at 30 days, a reminder at 60 days, and a reminder at 90 days. Well, come April 1st, anybody who makes a pledge from April 1st on will not get the full reminder cycle before the end of the fiscal year. So it's really important that you try to figure something else out. So I would recommend that you switch as of April 1st to a 15, 45, 60-day cycle. So you change your default due date to 15 days from the date that the pledge is taken. Then you send them a reminder after 15 days. You send them another at 45, and you send them another at 60. That's going to really tighten up that reminder cycle so that you have more of those folks who don't want to fulfill it online and don't want to give on a credit card. It's more likely to come in with that shorter cycle. That may require you reaching out now to advancement services and figuring out how all of this stuff gets done now. If you're not in charge of it, it might require some coordination. But I know that it will make sure that you get the most money and the most funds in the door possible by June 30th. And really finding new prospects wherever possible. So I got a lot of ideas for this to give you, but basically you need fresh records to call in the fourth quarter to make the most of your students' time and your time that you're paying them to be there every hour. You need to find new folks to call. New folks means more dollars, and if those new folks are alumni, it means more donors, more higher alumni participation rates. So one thing you can do, does not exactly help your alumni participation rates, but it will help your dollars, is to load up a second ask campaign. So if anyone gave between July 1 and June 30th, not July 1 and December 31st, you're going to want to load those folks up for a second ask campaign. Now, the second ask needs to be decidedly different from whatever you asked them for the first time. So if you ask them for a college-based ask, so you ask them to support their college of business that they graduated from, you can make that distinct in two ways. You can ask them for the general fund for your school, the broadest possible fund, or you could drill down to the department level and ask them for the marketing department instead of the college of business. Either way, as long as the ask is distinct, the second ask campaign should have really good participation, so 40% or higher, I would say. And that's a great way to stay productive here in the fourth quarter. If you're not already calling parents and doing a Parents Fund campaign, again, it doesn't really help your alumni participation rates, but it does help your dollars and it helps you stay productive, is calling parents. You need to contact your admissions office or your Parents Fund, Office of Parents Programs to get this data. And even if it's just a test, if you've never done it before, this is a great thing to add in the fourth quarter. For parents, your best groups, if you have to kind of prioritize to do a test, your best groups are going to be freshmen and out-of-state parents. So freshmen out-of-state is like the best possible group you could get, but I would recommend if you're going to get a test group, get parents of freshmen or get all of the out-of-state parents for your institution. And then it kind of goes up from there. So sophomores are usually higher participation than junior and senior parents and so forth. So that's another idea to get new prospects on the phone. Any new colleges, schools, or units that you've never called for before. Perhaps you have a regional campus that you've never done a calling campaign for, a divinity school, a law school. All of these are opportunities, again, here in the fourth quarter that you can open up doors, even if it's just for a small test. So, having those conversations now so that you can get them loaded up in April and May and hopefully bring in some dollars by the end of the campaign. Sometimes, again, if a college has backed out a few years ago, maybe they have a new dean who didn't even know this was an option. And all of a sudden, now you've got more alumni that you can help get on board to reach your alumni participation goals. And then another great project is what's called a DNC refresh. So we all know as Phonathon managers that sometimes callers misinterpret what the prospects are saying. So the prospect may say they don't want to be called anymore this year, and the caller marks them down as a do not call. Well, this is really damaging to the program if you don't have a process for rotating these folks off of this do not call list. I've done this process at 2 different institutions before, both at Southern Miss and at South Carolina, and it was really successful. I do know of one small liberal arts college that tried this, and it was very controversial, but I would say that with large state schools, you're hardly going to get any complaints about doing this. So I'd set a rule. Maybe it's if they've been on the do not call list more than 3 years or more than 1 year or more than 5, whatever you're comfortable with. Send those folks a postcard. And the postcard simply says, forever is a long time not to hear from your alma mater. And it explains that you're going to rotate them off of the do not call list, and they'll be getting a call in the month of April. And if they want to remain on the do not call list, that you would be happy to honor that. They just need to send you an email at this particular email address, whatever it is. And then you go ahead and you load them up on your calling software. And then right before calling begins, you delete anyone who asked to remain on the do not call list. Now, I will say that your scripts do not need to be different. They don't need to address the fact that they were ever on the do not call list. Most of these folks don't even remember that they were. And you don't need to label them as previous DNC prospects. You need to call them special prospects or fourth quarter prospects or something like that so that it doesn't affect the caller's psychology in how they approach these folks. So at South Carolina, we did this. We raised over $40,000 from this group the first time we tried it. And again, most of those were lost alumni that we weren't allowed to call because they were trapped on the DNC list. So it improved alumni participation rates as well. At Southern Miss, the smaller institution, but the results were similar. We raised over $21,000 from this group. So that's a great fourth quarter project, is to kind of load up those previously DNC prospects, special prospects. And then if you're not doing a cell phone append and you have the budget to do that research, I would recommend that you do that. If you do it now, you should still be able to load those prospects up for calling in the fourth quarter. So a cell phone append is a research process. There's lots of different companies that do this. I know that I think Harris Connect does it. I know Alumni Finder definitely does it. and Pacific East. There are others. There's lots of vendors that do this. And you send them what information you do have on your prospects. You usually delimit it by people who have given recently and that you don't, that you had a bad number for, you had no good contact information. So you might take everybody from last year and everybody from this fall who you didn't have a good phone number for, and then restrict it by how closely they've given in the past to fit your budget. Have those records researched and identify if you can find their cell phone number. You'll find a lot more than you think. This is a newish product and there's lots of success with this. Load them onto your system. Again, you know, call them research records or whatever you want to call them. Normally you'll find their cell phone number, which as we know is the liquid gold in Phonathon, and call them up. And many of these folks will be people you haven't talked to in years because you don't have their good contact info. Now you do, and you will make a lot of money. And again, both the DNC refresh and the sell append are often lost alumni prospects that you'll find, and you will improve your participation rates as well as help to reach your dollar goal. So I'm just going to check and see really quickly if we had any questions come through on our chat. So everybody see the chat box on the right hand side. Do make sure that you're you know, writing to me if you have questions, because we'll be taking questions here in just a few minutes. So finishing strong. So the first slide was really about how do you reach your goals if you're behind. And this slide is about finishing strong. So no matter if you're chasing down goals in your main Phonathon or if you're in a good position, you definitely want to be doing some stewardship and fulfillment work. And usually in Phonathon, that means reminder calls and thank you calls. Often you're not going to have the luxury of putting your entire calling floor, your entire roster of callers into doing this reminder and thank you work. So I'm going to give you some tips as to how to prioritize that work. For reminder calls, you're going to want to start with those 100+ pledges. So making sure that you get those high dollar folks fulfilled on a credit card if possible. You want that laser focus on getting those credit cards. And that means you want to script lots of different credit card pitches. And I'm going to run through some of your options for that. But you're going to want to put your really awesome credit card callers into these reminder calls and reward them thusly, because reminder calling is hard work. But you know, they need to know that getting another pledge and sending out one more letter when they haven't responded to their 30, 60, 90-day reminders is not what we want. We don't just want an excuse to send out another letter. We really want to get this gift in on a credit card. So lots of different credit card pitches. You can draft the normal reasons plus reconsider, and your rebuttal should always follow the formula of start with the assumptive and then back it up with reasons and reconsider. But those reasons can be very specific to the needs and concerns of the prospect. So you might want to pitch that how much money it saves the institution. You can easily find this out by finding out how many credit cards you had the previous year and multiplying that out by how much it cost you to print every reminder letter, and if you think about 4 reminder letters per prospect, the immediate reminder and the 30, 60, 90 day, how much the stamp cost, how much the postage and processing cost, and estimate that out. Usually it's in the thousands. Like it's usually for a large university, $8,000 to $15,000 that you can save if you got all your gifts on a credit card. Or because you got all these credit cards last year, that's how much money you saved the institution. So quantifying that can sometimes help, you know, convince the prospect to go ahead and do it. A pitch that is eco-friendly. A lot of folks really like that. It's a green option to give on a credit card because you're not sending out all of this mail. You know, people also don't want all that mail around their house oftentimes. You know, they don't want to have to sort through it or anything like that. Especially in the summer where people are going to be gone on vacation, they don't want to get all that extra mail. So push that it's eco-friendly. If they're concerned about security, your callers should be comfortable talking about the fact that you're a PCI compliant institution and how and why you are PCI compliant. So I have a blog post on Real Deal Fundraising about PCI compliance, and that's payment card industry compliance, and how you can find out the regulations about that and make sure that you are abiding by that and that you're totally secure in the way you process your cards. So your callers should be able to discuss how safe it is, and that, you know, how everything is processed, and that nothing is written down and everything's shredded, and or it's right into the computer and it never gets written down, it's encrypted. You can draft all of that for them and make it very specific to your institution. Some folks they just like to send a check. So you need to address that fact and, you know, just say, well, I've talked to lots of folks who have felt that way in the past, and they did finally make the switch this year, and they really like the fact that they, you know, are saving the institution money. So you draft something for each specific thing. Also, folks sometimes want to know that they're going to have a record of the gift for their tax purposes, and they don't believe that they'll get one if they do a credit card over the phone. You need to let them know that you'll be happy to send them a record via email, or you can send them a single tax receipt in the mail per their choice. So drafting all those different rebuttals and credit card pitches will help you with the reminder calling, making them very specific and letting your caller know how they all work so that they're nimble enough to switch between them. And push online fulfillment. Again, I mentioned this already. Have a website, have your autoresponders drafted so that when they capture the email address, all this stuff is going out next day. And you're giving them the option, directing them to a fulfillment website where they can put their credit card information if they're not comfortable giving it over the phone to one of your callers. Switching to thank you calls. I recommend that you really work out a good system for tracking who receives a thank you call message and who does not, because it's going to enable you to measure the impact of these calls. So it's generally been proven in the research that if someone receives a thank you call from a student, that they will retain as a donor the next year. So if you can prove that at your specific institution by some strategic tracking, maybe you talk with advancement services and you put an appeal code or an attribute or something on the records of these prospects that you're going to be thanking. And then at the end of the year, maybe you let them know, hey, here's a couple hundred that we just weren't able to reach. And then they can remove the codes from those records. And then the next year, you can look at who actually gives and then cross-reference it with those codes and see whether the non-thanked prospects had a higher retention rate or the ones that you did thank. But if you don't think about how you're going to track it now, you won't be able to get the data out that you want later. So, and who do you actually need to thank? Who should be your priority? I recommend first-time donors. There's a lot of good research out there, again, that getting a phone call from a student when you've made your very first gift increases the likelihood significantly that you will give again and again and again. And then I would switch your priority to the 100+ donors. So first-time donors, and once you've called all of those, then switch to your high-level folks. I never recommend in Phonathon leaving messages except in the case of thank you calls. Most of the time when you're doing calling campaign, leaving messages is both ineffective and slows you down, very inefficient. So with thank you calls, though, there's no call to action. You're not asking them to do anything, which they're highly unlikely to do based on a voicemail, but you're thanking them. So it's a feel-good message that they will receive. I would save this till your last week or two of calling and then just leave all the messages that you can. But, you know, leaving messages is an okay thing to do in your thank you calls. It's really the only time that I would track that. I would, in your tracking system, distinguish between who gets a voicemail and who gets an actual phone call chat with a student, because those may have bearing on whether or not people retain in the new fiscal year. And there's really no reason for your stewardship and fulfillment calls to be isolated. With email and social media and even simple things like postcards, you can do a whole multi-channel thank you and fulfillment campaign. It's very easy to take pictures of your students, smiling at their desk with their headsets on, and those go out on social media and they all say thank you. It can go out via email as well. So just really think about coordinating a multi-channel social media email-based stewardship and fulfillment campaign in that fourth quarter. So just use your creativity there. It's really cheap and easy. You could spend absolutely nothing except a little bit of your time and do a really fun stewardship campaign that works with your thank you calls digitally, all digitally. So let's talk about preparing for next year. What do you need to do in order to get ready for your next calling campaign, for your fall campaign? I recommend you start with a benchmarking survey. So you want to collect a 5, 6, 7 peer institutions and 3 or 4 aspirant institutions. So who are your rivals? Who are your peer institutions that everybody thinks that you're in the same league as? And then who do you want to be? Who does your university sort of aspire to be? Maybe it's a bigger school. Maybe it's a slightly more prestigious school. But send them a survey, a little survey monkey. Wouldn't take you too long to put together. And send them an email inviting them to participate in this survey. Ask them how much money their Phonathon raises. Ask them how much their entire annual fund raises. How many donors? What's their alumni participation rate? How many calling stations do they have? How many calling hours do they have in their budget? What other things do they spend money on in the Phonathon? How do they, ask them all these basic questions about how much do they spend on data research a year? Knowing this information is really powerful when you're trying to lobby with your CFO, with your AVP, with your Director of Annual Giving and Advancement Services. Because if you say that you need 4 more calling stations and your peer institution is raising $100,000 more in the annual fund than you, in the Phonathon than you, then you can attribute that to the fact that you don't have as many stations as them. And this is going to be really powerful. Similarly, if they spend thousands more on data research than your institution is doing, your contact rates are much lower than theirs. Obviously, if you want to play in the same league as these peer institutions and some of the aspirant ones, you're going to need that information to make your case. The second thing I would do as you're thinking about next year is look at some modeling. And this doesn't need to be complicated. Just take your basic statistics and put them in a spreadsheet. And then say, okay, I'm going to change one statistic at a time. And where would my results be if? Where would my results be if we completed 65% of calls instead of 50? I can guarantee you that your results would be much higher because you're just doing a lot more volume in that case. Where would my results be if our contact rate was 55% versus 35%? Again, I can guarantee you your results would be much higher. So if you look at these things and just sort of play with one statistic at a time, and then you can kind of start to combine them and say what's reasonable. You will not increase your contact rates by 20 percentage points in 1 year, but you can slowly move that forward, and you can slowly complete more calls, and you can slowly improve your participation rates. So where can you expect reasonable growth in your statistics, and what would it require? Again, it may require investment in data research. It may require more calling hours. It may require more calling stations in your center. It might require more training hours to make sure that your callers know what they're doing a little bit better and have more mock calling practice. whatever it is, modeling is going to be able to show the expense that you're putting in has a result in the bottom line, of what you can raise for your institution, connecting those two things. Data research and integrity. Again, don't neglect this. Make sure on my blog there is a resource that is called The Complete Guide to Improving Phonathon Contact Rates. It was like a 6-part series that I did that walked you through all of those basic things. Meet with your advancement services team and ask them what they're doing now in terms of keeping up phone numbers, emails, addresses, etc. And what can you do to help? What can you add to that cycle? And what can you afford in the next year to put forward into investment for this? Package it all together with a bow. You have to make it presentable to show that you have actually put some thought into this plan. I recommend at minimum that you put together a mock-up budget and a calendar of activities. So this shows at least that you know what you're going to do throughout the year and when you need to do it, and then how much it is going to cost, how much your cost estimates for all of these things. And this provides you, if you have the opportunity to do a full-fledged plan where you go into case development and scripting and timing and return on investment for new projects and stuff. If you can do that to provide sort of a cover report for your calendar and budget, great. But the minimum you need is the calendar and the budget. And that's what you do when you set the meeting to lobby for future resources. You need to make your case. You probably need to do it pretty soon. I know many institutions, if you have a CFO or an AVP that's really on the ball, they'll start making budgetary decisions in February and March. So whatever you can put into this to get on their calendar soon and get your case ready for what you need for next year. You need to prove to them that Phonathon is a contributor to what you're trying to do. So maybe you look at finding out how many $1 million donors at your institution started out as annual fund donors, probably in the Phonathon. You can go back and look at, the $1 million donors for your institution and go back and look at their giving history. See if you can do that research and tell that story, because lead generation is one of the most important things that Phonathon does. So showing them that you're already a contributor, that you're a valued part of the annual giving pie, and then asking for your resources and showing that those resources have a demonstrable link to return on investment for the institution. If you can do that, you're highly likely to get the resources you need for the future. And so we're going to take a quick question break right now. So if you have questions, you can put them in that chat box on the side. If there are those of you here who have questions, let's put them in, and I'll wait just a minute to see if we have any questions at this point. Okay, you can continue to add questions in the chat box if you have any. I'm not seeing any. I hope that I am looking in the right place. I'm looking in my group chat here on the side, and I'm not seeing any questions, but I hope that I'm looking in the right spot. So, so I'm going to go back to here, and we're going to take a look at our takeaways. So whether you're doing well or you're falling behind, you are in danger of stagnating at this time of year. So you really need to work harder and smarter to reach your year-end goals, especially if you're behind. If you're doing well, design a really great campaign to maximize your stewardship and fulfillment. Like, this is the time of year to really take it to the next level there. And it's so easy to do, not just in terms of your calling campaign, but also in terms of making it multi-channel and letting people see the face of Phonathon on social media and whatnot, and saying thank you that way. And no matter how this year is going, now is really the time to plan for next year's success. So really thinking about all the ways in which you can improve your Phonathon going forward. And one of the things that I did mean to mention when we were talking about stewardship and fulfillment is, as you're planning for next year, think about what it might look like if you did your stewardship and fulfillment work, your reminder calls and your thank you calls, on a rolling basis throughout your year. So that's really where I'm seeing a lot of institutions moving, is that it's a part of their monthly process to thank the people that gave the month before or the week before, and they don't wait till the end of the year to do this stewardship and fulfillment work. And then they're making that reminder phone call much closer to the time of the actual gift, so that we don't let people go a full 90 or 120 days before receiving a phone call, or the entire year, months and months. So again, this requires a high level of coordination and planning in order to make that rolling calendar work, where you're loading those thank you calls and reminder calls on a monthly basis. But it's really the smart way to kind of go about it. So it's not just a once a year thing, that it's at least twice a year. You're doing some in November and December, and some in the fourth quarter, but monthly rolling is actually where it's kind of going in the future. So let's return to our so what. So again, just reminding ourselves that we're doing this because we want to make sure that our budget is maximized, that we hit our goals for our institution. If it doesn't fulfill, it won't matter, because it won't actually meet the mission. And partially we need to do this for our students, because they've invested in you, they've worked hard for you this year. You owe it to them to finish strong and let them have that moment of celebration with you. And again, your future career prospects hang in the balance. Like, what are you going to be known for? Are you going to be known for finishing strong, or for just having a promising start? So here are some action items. You can take these away and just use this as your fourth quarter plan, or feel free to modify, of course, as necessary. You can hire more callers, and you can run more shifts if that's what you need to do to reach your goals. Identify those calling pools to reopen, and or combine small calling pools so that they call through more efficiently. Identify new campaigns to launch. Second ask, parents, new college schools and units that you've never called for before. Do tests at least, even if you're not loading the whole group. Doing a do not call refresh. Doing a cell phone append work, research prospects in the fourth quarter. All great ideas for getting new folks on board. Shift all your motivation to credit cards right now. Don't reward people just for pledges. Make sure that you're rewarding them for securing the gift on a credit card, or at least capturing the email and pushing online fulfillment. Consider moving to that 15, 45, 60-day reminder cycle as of April 1st, if not before. So, make the pledge due 15 days from the date the pledge is taken, and then remind at 15, 45, and 60. Design your reminder calling campaign around credit cards, of course, and start with those 100+ donors. That's going to be where you're going to get the most bang for your buck there. Design your thank you campaign. Make sure you track everything well, and then make sure you focus on those first-time donors to make sure that you retain them going forward and catch them on that crucial second gift. Make your stewardship and fulfillment campaign multi-channel. Utilize and leverage social media and email to do a really low cost but very connective campaign, where people see the faces of these callers and of the students that they're helping. Conduct a benchmarking study. Easy to do, just a little survey monkey. Find your equivalent position person, the Phonathon manager or the annual giving person at other institutions. Send them out an email. And I did forget to mention that the benefit of them doing the benchmarking study is that you tell them that you'll compile the information and share it with them. So they get something back out of it. So if they take their time to do a 5 or 10 minute survey for you, they're going to get something back out of this, because they may be wanting to do a study like this as well, and they haven't had time. So share this information back out with your colleagues at these peer institutions and these aspirant institutions. Do some statistical modeling. Where would you be if your contact rate was higher? Where would you be if your completion rate was higher? Where would you be if your average gift was higher? And then put this into your Phonathon strategic plan and set the meeting so that you can lobby for your budget for next year. And again, you might want to do this really quickly. I definitely think you should do it before graduation this year. For most people, after commencement is too long. Don't wait till the summer to do your strategic plan. And I'll just pause again for a second and see if anybody has any questions before we get into the home stretch here. All right, well, if you're still hanging in there with me, I do want to mention that I wrote an ebook. It's my first ebook. I have another book that's out through Academic Impressions about Phonathon scripting. You can find that at academicimpressions.com, which is it's available on PDF or as like a real live book. This is an ebook, and it is chock full of information about how to staff your Phonathon. So I mentioned a little bit about how I had to routinely keep a roster of 110 student callers at the University of South Carolina. And if I was just dabbling in caller turnover, I would not have survived there because I would have been hiring folks all the time. So this is really not just about staffing up fast, but it's also about staffing smarter and retaining your callers. So it's going to show you how to get your staffing targets so that you know how many applications you need to get for the number of callers that you need, how many callers exactly do you need to hire. It's going to walk you through that with a really clear formula. How to brand your Phonathon so that you get the best callers and you're not just interviewing, the bottom of the barrel callers that wouldn't be a good fit for you. You need to generate lots of applications super fast and be really selective with the candidates. How to design an interview process that makes it easy for you to hire the callers. So how do you do them all fast? And one of those secrets is what I call the group interview process, the open house group interview. And this tells you step by step how to do it. You need to interview all of those applicants in one evening and get them up and running quick. And this will allow you to get out from under this spinning of the wheels of caller turnover. And you can actually start loving your job. You'll be able to do more statistical analysis and do more strategic planning like we've discussed on this webinar. And really, you're going to be able to do all of this very quickly because there are dozens of samples and templates in here, even down to the emails. What does the email look like when you thank somebody for applying? What does the email look like when you hire them? What's the email look like when you tell them no? All of that stuff is in there, and you can feel free to just cut and paste to your heart's content. So because you attended this webinar today, I'm giving you guys a 20% off coupon for this book, How to Staff Your Phonathon Super Fast, 7 Secrets to Fill the Seats. I think this book is almost 50 pages with all of the extras and stuff. And the code today is webinar 1736. The price with the coupon is $40, and you can find that at realdealfundraising.com/store. And I'll make sure to include that information in your follow-up email after this webinar. So are there any final questions today? I do hope that I'm looking in the right spot here for the questions. If not, I really appreciate you coming today to this webinar. I hope that this was helpful. I'll be sending out a survey. I am putting together, I got a couple more ebooks in the works. One is about contact rates. And even more ideas of how to improve your contact rates going forward. And one is about training incredible young fundraisers. So how do we construct our training so that we make really great callers out of that process? So I hope that one of those will be interesting to you. And if not, I want to know what you want to know, because as part of my mission at Real Deal Fundraising, support you in your journey as a philanthropy professional. So I hope that this was helpful today, and please be in touch with me via email, and hopefully we will go forward and have a great fourth quarter in your phonathon. Thanks. Hey everybody, it's Jessica. Hey everyone, it's Jessica. Hello, hello. Hi everybody.